Apna Ghar got started in 1985 with a group of volunteer women who set up a crisis line to respond to the needs of South Asian immigrant women who were experiencing domestic violence. And during the course of referring people through the crisis line to existing agencies, they realized that the existing agencies could not accommodate the cultural and linguistic needs of these South Asian immigrant survivors, and so they set up their own agency with the shelter, with counseling, legal advocacy, case management, and a visitation center, and those are the programs that we still have, and they started in 1990. Apna Ghar's niche really is in serving immigrant women who have experienced domestic violence, so we can accommodate sort of linguistic needs but also cultural needs. For example, at our shelter we have actually like 3 refrigerators, so one for vegetarian food and things like that. So it's this idea that it's a home-like environment and that all of the specific religious, cultural, linguistic needs, to the extent that we can, are accommodated. So Apna Ghar actually means our home in Hindi and Urdu, which are the primary languages of India and Pakistan. And then the agency was set up to serve South Asian immigrant survivors. But because we've been in the uptown area, we're really serving all, as we call, underserved immigrant communities. So we're serving people from Central Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, even some European countries, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean.
We have a definition of domestic violence up here, and there's a lot of various definitions, but a lot of them have these components in them, and that is a systematic pattern of behaviors and relationships that are used to gain and or maintain power over another by exerting privilege. Privilege could be strength, social stature, physical ability. So a lot of it is the pattern and power and control. I did have a client who couldn't bear children. And her husband made her feel like she was the scum of the earth. I mean, he used that against her day in, day out, made her feel like she was not a woman, she was not worth living. So they use your weakness as a victim and just know how to use that against you. Using children, this is a big one we see. It could be brainwashing the kids against the mother, or threatening to go to court and take full custody, and that keeps a lot of people from reporting DV. Economic abuse is also a very, very big one we see. It could be something like using a social security number to get loans, so messing up someone's credit, or it could be not giving any money, not giving money for the children's school fees, for the groceries, for everything. They have to beg for money, and so it's a very strong hold that an abuser can have. So how common is domestic violence? Say 1 in 3 women do face some sort of domestic violence. Some stats say 1 in 4. I think 1 in 3 is what I've heard. Just depends what stat you go to. And who does it affect? Firstly, I know we say women, we use she, but we're very, very aware that men absolutely face domestic violence. So it's just easier sometimes to use the gender pronoun she. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence said, rural and urban women of all religious, ethnic, socioeconomic, educational backgrounds, and of varying ages, physical abilities, and lifestyles can be affected by domestic violence. There's not a typical woman who will be battered. Sometimes you think, oh, well, she's from a foreign country, so it's more acceptable there. No, we definitely see domestically, internationally, it's even. She's not educated, so she must be more susceptible. Absolutely not. We've had doctors, engineers come in.
I want to talk briefly as to how clients come to the United States. There really are, immigrants come to the United States. There really are just 2 ways, right? They come here with permission or they come here without. So they either come here through a visa or their family petitions for them. Visas are temporary permission to be in the United States. You either come here on a student visa or a tourist visa, and the idea is that you're here for a limited time and you're supposed to return to your home country. Family petitions are different. They're a family, a parent, child, spouse, siblings sometimes petition for you, and then you come into the country with the idea of staying here and establishing your life, family reunification. However, with the visas and mostly with the family petitions, the benefit is to the citizen or the resident that's applying for that petition. So I apply for my spouse who's not a citizen of the United States. It's up to me whether I want to continue that petition up until they become a resident. So at any point in time, if I decide I want to withdraw that petition, I can usually do that. So that's a big power that I can hold over my spouse. And the statistics show that most women who come here documented come through a family petition. So that means that they're beholden often to some type of family member. And even if that family member isn't wielding that power over them, it's still a kind of a mental thing to know this person paid for me to come here, I owe this person this, this gratitude, and that can really affect the relationship as well, the dynamics. There is a correlation between trafficking and domestic violence. Oftentimes, there's an intimate relationship for people who are considered pimps, and they start a relationship with someone and then coerce them or entice them or force them to enter into sex work. Oftentimes then in the courtroom or in the criminal system, the law enforcement agencies might not see that the connection between an intimate partner and a pimp, and so then the victim will suffer ramifications because they think it's just a domestic violence issue, not a trafficking issue. Likewise, when it comes to forced labor, there can be a push or a pull from domestic violence. For example, there might be someone who's in a domestic violent relationship and there's no means to escape, and so they're enticed to come to the United States to work under the premise that they'll have a job, but then they come here and they really are trafficked, but they came here to escape the domestic violence. The special needs that domestic violence victims face who are immigrants is definitely a cultural barrier and also a language barrier. They might not understand the system because of those two barriers, and they might just have a lack of knowledge as to the legal system here in the United States, which is very different than someone who was born here and understands the system. The top concerns that an immigrant DV victim raises are probably the top three would be confidentiality issues, a fear of harming their abuser, and also fear of being deported. And so the confidentiality issue is that they're concerned that people will find out that they have filed these types of petitions, or they're concerned that the abuser will find out and they will suffer ramifications. They're also concerned that the abuser might suffer consequences himself or herself if they file these types of petitions, and they're in a relationship with this person, and so they don't want to harm them. They're also concerned that their abuser might face consequences if they file these types of petitions. They are in a relationship oftentimes with the abusers and they don't want to harm them, and so they are wary of filing these types of petitions because they don't want to cause more trouble. And at the end of it too, they're also concerned that if they are denied, they might get placed in deportation proceedings, they might be removed from the country, they might lose access to their children, or that the abusers will gain access to the children because of this petition. The way that domestic violence immigrants victims can remain safe when facing deportation proceedings is that when they cooperate with the police, to be as fully honest about the crime that has happened, because that can lead to them being able to access some remedies through immigration that they might not have been able to if they didn't come out and say that they were victims of domestic violence. It's also important to mention that if you are in proceedings with the judge, because the judge might recognize that you have some remedies available to you. And finally, if they are in detention, they can talk to the custom and enforcement agents and talk about their victimization, because the custom and enforcement agents do have a checklist of people who they consider a vulnerable population, and if they meet the certain criteria, they might be released.
The way we first encounter many of our clients is that they call us or they come to us with immigration issues. And we see that through speaking with them that it's just not immigration, but there's some sort of domestic violence in their past. We speak to them about why their immigration status has changed or what has changed. And through that we realize that there is many times domestic violence.
A lot of the time is spent explaining different rights and processes, legal processes to survivors, answering questions. A lot of time is also spent trying to find legal service providers to represent them. It can be a difficult process or just a timely one. So a lot of time is spent trying to find representation And a lot of time is also spent accompanying clients to different attorney meetings or court cases, or court hearings.
It's a huge support system. Many times these women have been alone throughout the whole process, whether it's in their marriage, their relationship, growing up, and a legal advocate can provide support, whether it's in an attorney's office, in front of a judge, in an immigration hearing. So that support, having someone in your corner physically, can be a huge advantage.
If a client is unable to find representation for an immigration case or a family law case, it can be really difficult, it can be really disappointing. So I think a big role is for the advocate to be supportive, especially if it's been a tiring process, and remind the client that there are always other options, there's always another way to try achieving the same goal. So if that means helping a client file something pro se without an attorney, for example, we can help clients file an order of protection without an attorney, then there's those options, and there's other options as well to at least gain some information. For example, finding a private attorney to do at least one free consultation so that the client has at least some legal understanding of her situation and can have a better set of information to make decisions from there.
It can be difficult to find representation for domestic violence victims because sometimes their just intakes aren't open for legal aid agencies. And that's one way that legal advocates can help, in that knowing who has an intake, who is open, and that can help victims by not having to tell their story over and over again.
Clients often ask what the difference is between the police and Immigration Customs Enforcement, or rather they would just assume that they're the same, and part of our role is to explain the difference between the two. And at least in Cook County, there definitely is a different role, and we can safely say that you're not calling immigration if you call the police in an emergency, and that the police are not to ask of your immigration status if you are calling them for help. So we do remind our clients that it is okay to call the police regardless of your immigration status. I'm aware that that is not necessarily the case for all counties or all parts of the country, but we do at least try to explain that calling the police does not mean that you are going to be reported to Immigration Customs Enforcement.
When a domestic violence survivor has children, an issue is child abduction. Many times an abuser uses that against the survivor. They try to bring a case against the survivor that she abducted the children and took them away from him or the marital home, and bring that to court against her.
The clients I worked with often were non-English speaking, and the abusers who were mistreating them often were English speaking. And so that makes it very complex in terms of availing yourself of any sort of law enforcement help. When we see these expectations of, well, why didn't you call the police? Well, why haven't you filed an order of protection? We have to understand that these survivors are coming from a very, very different background and cultural context. And so those expectations may not be reasonable indicia of a client's credibility. The various stakeholders that work with these particular survivors, so law enforcement, family law attorneys, immigration law attorneys, advocates, social service providers, that we move towards a system of cultural competency and effectiveness that allows us to really serve survivors from a vast array of backgrounds, and that takes into account the demographic shifts in our city and really thinks about how culture intersects with every aspect of a legal case, from the immigration case to the family law case. And I'm very hopeful that we can create systems that are effective systems and that will improve the outcomes of these survivors' lives and their children's lives in the future.
When I'm coming Apna Ghar, I meet Neha the first year. And that time, I'm not speaking English, when I don't know how to write my last name. And then Neha, she's a big supporter. She say, and I cry, I say, do you guys send me back Pakistan because I have 2 kids? So she said, don't worry, we help you. Don't nervous, don't scare for anybody. Like they want to boys. They don't want me, they want only boys. But now it's too late. Now they know, before I'm scared for everything, and my husband is threatening me a lot in US. And he say, oh, you tell who? You call police? What do you say? You don't speak English. So how do you explain what I did with you? But Apnegar, they take me doctors, they take me everywhere for my, I'm completely mentally disturbed that time. And I show my all body part where he threatening me, it burned me and everything. Because I trust Apnegar.